So this is one of my schools, Gosford. It's you know, if you were to look in Toronto District School Board, we have the Learning Opportunities Index. They're in the lowest or highest, however you want to look at it. One of the most needy schools, for lack of a better way to describe it, in every way, in terms of socioeconomic, academics, everything, in our board. And they have a phenomenal principal and a phenomenal staff. And so last year they decided they needed to really think about how to make their school improvement journey public. So this is actually what it looked like towards the end of the year. And what you'll see there, this is in their library, and they happen to have a school where the library is a place that you have to walk through to get to other places in the school. There's parents in the library, there's kids in the library, there's people walking through the library all the time. It's a real learning commons, and you'll see that through the year, they started off just putting on what were their goals, primary and junior goals, and what you can't see on the photo is they've got their 3 areas at the top. I have a whole report with all the photos, but I'm not going to bore you with them. And as the year went, they started actually populating the teacher speak, the educator speak that's on there with actual artifacts of student learning. And then at each of their PLCs, they'd actually talk about how did they know they were making progress toward their goals, and how did those artifacts actually represent that. So, and you can see they've got their goals. They actually have their theories of action. So they went really deep in their school improvement process, from simply saying, you know, we really want to improve how students use manipulatives in their mathematics and see them as real tools. And they actually had a theory of action. And I actually had the privilege of sitting in one of their PLCs in the spring. And luckily I didn't freak them out, because sometimes when your superintendent sits in your PLC, you're a little bit scared to talk. But they weren't, because that's the culture created at their school. And they were like, okay, well, we think all this great stuff has happened, but what do the kids think? None of us have asked the kids. What do the kids think about the use of manipulatives, and is it helping them? And they actually designed in primary interview questions, and they decided they would select a few kids per class, but not. Oftentimes we call students some certain marker students, but they said we're not going to do the traditional marker student, the one that's struggling or the one that's doing really well. We're going to pick the ones we're really curious about, the ones we're not always sure what they're thinking. We're going to ask them. And then in junior, they actually did a Google survey, because they've been using technology a lot in their school, and they did a Google survey. So they surveyed all the junior students, and then they shared that with me, which was amazing. And that data actually is guiding their school improvement process this year. So I'm just going to move on to the next one. So here I've just put a copy of the front of their survey. And what they did is they looked at some of the questions in the EQAO student survey, and then they looked at their own wonderings, and they kind of mishmashed it all together and made their own survey questions. And then they actually posted those up on the board as well, so that people could see them. And you can see what I did in the summer is actually go through and create a summary of my own learning. That's my timer. So, and actually plug in the competencies or the conditions that matched what I observed. So it was another way for me to actually analyze my own documentation of the learning. I'm just going to flip to the one more. And you'll see that one of the things this particular school did, and a lot of my schools do because I'm very active on Twitter. It's a bit to do with having attentional issues. It helps me focus. A lot of them are on Twitter, so I know what's happening in all my schools that are on Twitter. I'm in there about every 3 weeks, but if I'm not in there, I have a pretty good idea of what's going on because they're tweeting. And you can see, I can see through their tweets. So this principal, part of her goal was to document learning. She didn't even know how to take pictures on her phone or her iPad. And her staff got everyone hooked up on Twitter, including her. And this is an example of her documentation. And then what I did was actually link in the competencies so that I could see. So you can see this particular photo. Student learning is expressed through a variety of forms. So we're seeing that. That's what I'm looking for, and this is my evidence that I'm seeing it. And there's also student input on school and classroom decisions and strategies elicited and used. So students are having input in this particular conversation. So that's pretty much one of the things for me this year, one of the challenges for me at the end of all of my thinking about how do I use the competencies in my own documentation of learning is when schools got their EQAO results, because everyone worked really hard last year, what would they fall back on when they got those? Because sometimes you have a little bit of improvement, maybe you don't have some improvement, maybe you slid a little. Where would they go with their thinking? And every time I go to a school where they're a little bit disappointed in what happened with their EQAO results, I'm like, but where's your evidence that from last year? What are you talking to with your staff about the growth that they observed? Where is that? How are you doing that? Some have that. They're able to do it. Other ones didn't get on board with me so fast, so my challenge this year is how do I bring them into the fold so that when they're out and about in their buildings, they have that asset lens, they're documenting learning, and then how do we know how do we create that journey of documentation so at the end of the year we actually know what growth we have had and also where we still need to work. So that's my piece.
Okay. Can you hear me? I don't have to walk all the way over there. Oh, thank you. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to give each one of our panelists opportunity to respond to a discussion prompt. I'm hoping if we can do this well, we get to 2, and then I can get to you. But I'll gauge it by time because we really do want to get your questions this way, okay? So I think I want to start by asking you to think about an aha moment. So we're all on different stages of the continuum as we engaged in this work, some more recent, some more years behind us. But what was that aha moment that you've gotten so far through your journey? And anyone can start and anyone can add in.
I think for me, it's come from my students. As a junior teacher, and I've been teaching for 13 years, it's taken me a long time to come to this point of where I am. As a new teacher, I was excited about bums and chairs and lessons on the carpet and textbook work at their seats. And I think for me, and as Kim has articulated, all of these things, you can't have one without the other. They spiral all together. And when you use these domains to facilitate in a classroom as well as to assess, what ends up happening is I see these 33 kids in front of me as the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. And they put together their passion. I don't do Genius Hour, I do Genius Year. It is every day in our classroom. I feel bad when they only get an hour to talk about what they're passionate about, so I give them 6.5 hours. And they put presentations together, as the speakers this morning said, on chemicals and BPA and environmental impacts of things and solar systems, and these are the things that they're excited and passionate about. And I sit at the back of the room as I watch these presentations that my kids put on, Googling, like, is this right? Like, I have no idea. They're talking about grade 12 chemistry. So I think that's my aha moment, is when you start to view students through this lens, the impact of who they are and their strengths and their interests are phenomenal. I just took my class yesterday to a first-year integrated science lecture at McMaster with a number of my colleagues, and they're texting me and twittering me, and I had 6 grade 5 students taking notes in a university lecture. And all as teachers were like, what could they possibly be writing? Like, they're talking about quantum physics up here. But that's who I see them as learners, and giving them the confidence to believe in themselves. Who cares what they're writing about? They're doing it. Go ahead.
What Allison said and what I think my colleague said, it makes me think about culture, right? We actually, I started teaching in 1989, right? And I started teaching in a time when play and activity-based learning were the way, and in my heart of hearts, I still believe in that wholeheartedly, and I have bins full of research to say why that's good. And I think we created a culture in education where the hard quantitative accountability became the way. And for me, the Measuring What Matters pieces, or the actual whole idea of it, is confirmation bias for me that we owe our students and our educators so much more than that. And it makes me think about what Jean said this morning. We owe them, in our world today where we have so much technology, so much complexity, we owe them the opportunity to get in, like in Kim's class, and solve problems and get dirty and try things and fail and try again. And in our own old accountability paradigm, when you failed, it was over. There were no do-overs. You were done and we're moving on. So this allows us to think about how do we give kids real feedback? How do we give educators, leaders, real feedback in a way that's valuable and allows them to move on and be better?
Okay, I'm going to make you add this to the prompt I'm about to give. Okay.
Oh dear, I was ready for that.
No, but I'm shifting, but I can see how it's going to fit. Okay. So where I want us to move into a conversation for the group is around those lessons learned. And I think when you think about your aha moment, some of those are lessons learned as well, or it could be successes, or it could be the challenges. But what was it around the implementation that you can share with someone who's sitting there thinking, I want to do this tomorrow, but what should I think about? So you can piggyback off of where you want to enter and then continue in that direction.
At the beginning of the day, we referenced the tension that exists and between being accountable to what we currently need to be accountable to and being accountable to what we intuitively know is the right thing to do and what we as educators know is the future. So what we learned was that the framework, the competencies, gave us the confidence to move forward with the type of innovation and the type of change that our gut told us we needed to do, and then we're seeing that it works. And more importantly than just our gut telling us that it's worked, when we got the competencies, my question was, how do I track this? How do I know it's working? And so it opened up a whole new field of assessing these soft skills so that when my superintendent comes around or my principal says, how do you know? For the first time, and I've been teaching for 25 years, ever, through all of this, you can name every soft skills program that we've been doing, I was actually able to say in an accountable way, this is how we know this is working. It's not just our stories. It's not just we were able to take a lot of data together and say, this is making a difference. And there's real tension in that, particularly in a low socioeconomic. We're second lowest in the board in math. So there's tension right there. And we had to address math through our students' self-regulation, particularly around challenges. So that's, if we hadn't had the competencies, I don't know that we would have had the confidence to move forward. So for that, I'm very, very grateful.
Awesome.
Dave, we should call them the confidencies.
New name, remix. Okay, so anyone else want to add to a lesson learned, challenge, or success, and then I'm going to take it to the
Sure,
floor.
I will. I think one of the, I'll stand up because I'm behind this and I can't see anybody that's over there. I think one of the things that not only have the competencies given me a language to, like Pam was saying, describe what I intuitively knew was right. It's also supported me in describing my practice to other people. I have, over the last few years, I have student teachers coming into my room. I have gone through a recent TPA process, trying to make my practice visible to other people. It can look messy, and there's a great big complexity. But when I'm able to, in some ways, simplify it down to here are our key goals, and here's what we're working towards, and I'm looking to see change over time in the growth of my students in relation to these competencies. Like, the classroom is a messy ecosystem. There are so many interactions that we can't always explain. And just because I do something, I may say, I'm going to put out these materials, and I anticipate the students will do this with them. And it never happens. It never happens. Like the simple cause-effect relationship, I don't see. But what I do see is unexpected things. What I do see is catalytic moments in which one child does something which inspires somebody else, and it goes in a whole different direction. And so when that is hard to explain, and that is hard to make your practice visible. So in all the complexity of my classroom ecosystem, I think the competencies have supported in giving a simplicity to it.
Thank you.